I'm joined now by candidate for governor of California, Tom Steyer. Thanks so much for joining me.
Brian, thank you for having me.
So obviously a lot of news in the California gubernatorial race, especially with the allegations against Eric Swalwell. He made an announcement a couple of days ago that he has decided to stay in this race and fight the allegations. So first and foremost, can I have your reaction to the fact that he is not stepping aside, that he's going to continue to run for governor?
Look, I have called for him to leave the race and to step down from Congress. The allegations are incredibly serious. As we know, the Manhattan District Attorney is opening an investigation tomorrow into his behavior. And I think under all circumstances, that precludes him from running for governor. But let me step away from Eric Swalwell for a second and talk about the women in the case. Because what we've seen here is a situation where women were, in an extreme fashion, abused, disrespected, and then silenced. And so I want to say how outrageous it is that there's a system that supports this, that allows where people are scared to come forward because they think that that will be incredibly bad for their careers. And I want to say that after all of the intense suffering that went on with regards to this behavior, Eric Swalwell's behavior, I applaud the women. I am so moved that they were brave and came forward and stood up and stood for what was right. And I think this is a story. There is a very seamy, extremely upsetting side to this story, but the flip side is trying to get a system that respects women fairly, allows them to speak, and redresses what appears to be extreme abuse.
So I want to pivot over to your gubernatorial campaign right now, especially in light of the fact that the predictive markets have shown your campaign surging in light of what's happening with Eric Swalwell. So in terms of the major issues that California is contending with, they are historically crime, homelessness, and I think more and more the demise of the entertainment industry. So can you speak about your priorities as governor, and to what extent are those issues going to be your top priorities?
So let me say this. My job running for governor is three things, Brian. It's to outwork every other candidate. I believe the person who gets elected governor will be the person who works the hardest. To go out and see Californians face to face. I've been doing town halls. I'm going to do a bus tour. I want to see and listen to as many Californians as possible, and to stick on the absolute bread and butter issues that are driving people's day-to-day lives. And you mentioned several of them, but I don't want to talk about the most important issues in this race without talking about affordability. And that's a fancy word. But what it basically means is things cost too much in California. And at the end of the month, people can't afford to live here. The majority of people can't make their budgets work at the end of the month. And that has to be the top priority for anyone who becomes the next governor.
So talk about those issues in particular, though. What is, we have heard governors, we've heard, I live in Los Angeles, we've heard mayors of Los Angeles say that they're going to get homelessness under control. I believe the unsheltered homeless population has decreased over the last several years, but the overall homeless population has still increased. And so what is your plan to tackle homelessness as it stands right now?
So my opinion about homelessness starts with the fact that nobody gets better on the street. That in fact, only about 1 in 7 people who become unhoused start with a significant mental health issue, either bipolar or substance abuse. But over time, so many more fall into that mental health problem because the stress of being on the street, the danger of being on the street, the vulnerability of being on the street puts immense pressure on their mental health. So my number one issue about homelessness is, one, keep people off the street. And if they're on the street, get them off the street as fast as possible, because being on the street in and of itself is a gigantic problem for them. So what does that mean from the standpoint of policy, and how do we address this? We have seen localities around California using emergency interim housing not permanent housing, not a place where people are going to live forever, but emergency interim housing up to 2 years. And what does that look like? It really looks like a room with a key, shared dining facilities, laundry facilities. You can bring your dog. You don't have to be clean. It's safe. And there's mental health support. And getting people off the street is absolutely critical to getting people back into society. So the strategy up to now has been we need permanent housing. That takes 7 years. It costs $750,000 a key. It obviously isn't working. And we've had a long time to see that it isn't working. And we need to move to something that's more compassionate, which actually moves much faster, which gets people off the street. And it's actually really important for the localities where this is happening too, Brian, because every community deserves to be safe. Every community deserves its children to be able to walk freely and safely around it. And so, in particular, I want to zone more for dense urban housing. We need housing. That the most important cost for people at the end of the month is their rent bill or their mortgage bill.
Yeah.
And so we need to build a lot more houses at a lot lower cost. And in order to do that, we need to do it densely around public transportation. And that means we need to have cities where people love to be, where they're walkable, where you don't have to be the Uber driver for your kids, and you don't have a super long commute to work. That's where we need to go. And in order to do that, we need to have urban environments and neighborhoods that people love to be in. Really important.
I mean, piggybacking off of that issue, and I have friends who are contractors and developers, and the number one issue is just the massive amount of time and hurdles it takes to actually build in California. I mean, there was the entire abundance discourse for Ezra Klein's book, and it's true. I mean, it is nearly impossible to build, certainly to build quickly in California. I mean, where I am in Los Angeles, it will take well over a year just for individual permits. And so can you speak a little bit about the extent to which permitting reform or just making building easier in California, or not allowing these environmental regulations that may have been well-intentioned in the beginning but now just serve as more paperwork and red tape, how you're going to look toward reforming that system?
So, Brian, let me say this. I always say there's no silver bullet for affordable housing in California. It's silver buckshot. And it does start with permitting. And there was a California Environmental Quality Act reform last year, which I strongly supported publicly, to say we need to bring down permitting times. We need to get rid of duplicative permits. We need to bring down the cost of permitting. All true, and it's not over. We are obviously over-regulating in a way that is not coordinated and incredibly expensive. That's number one. Number two is zoning. We need to be zoned where people can live and where it works for us as a state. So zoning, there was a zoning reform last year, SB 79, Senate Bill 79, which I also publicly supported. That's zoning is two. Three is the ability to build a house. There are tens of thousands of permitted zoned units that aren't being built because they can't be built to a cost that people can afford.
Yeah.
What can we do about that? There is an answer. The answer is we need to do industrial construction of houses and apartment buildings offsite and constructed onsite. The technology is here. We need to change some of the building codes. These people need to have orders. We can bring down costs at least a third per square foot by doing, and this will provide a lot of jobs if we're building a lot of housing. That's three. And fourth is this. The cities and counties of California have not wanted to give permits. They've dragged their feet, and then they've put in huge fees. The fees to build a house can be up to 20% of the cost of the house. And why is that true? The reason is because the cities and counties are responsible for the education and the healthcare of the people who are going to go live in that new housing, and they don't have enough money for it. So they're like, they don't want to permit new housing because it's an unfunded mandate to them. On day one, I have said I will call a special election to close a corporate real estate tax loophole that would bring, if we pass it, which we definitely will, That would bring $20 billion a year to the cities and counties. And we can use that to shorten the permitting time, to get them on site. And it's no longer an unfunded mandate, it's a funded mandate. So, and let me say this, Brian, if you look on my website, on all of the big issues, including homelessness, including all the things you brought up at the top, we have plans. We don't need a governor who knows there's a problem. We need a governor who understands the problem and has a solution, a plan that will work. And that is who I am. Honestly, I'm shocked sometimes to look at the other campaigns because they don't have concrete plans. They don't have a revenue plan. I'm saying I'll bring over $20 billion at the get-go to the state of California that we desperately need. No one else is really talking about how they're going to get revenue.
So one more obvious driver of revenue, especially where I am in Los Angeles, but also in Northern California in the Bay Area, is the entertainment industry. And we've seen the extent to which this industry has kind of been crippled over the last decade. At first, it was being outsourced to other states. I'm talking New Orleans, Atlanta, New Jersey, New York. And in recent years, we've seen even those different states lose the industry to Canada, to the UK, because all of these places had been offering better tax incentives than California had. We've just increased the tax credit for the entertainment industry from, I think, roughly $300 million to $750 million, a step in the right direction. Still not as high as Georgia was, and certainly not as high as the UK is offering. Really, at the end of the day, what these producers are looking for to keep jobs in California, to keep these projects in California, are better tax incentives than other places. I mean, it is just a numbers game at the end of the day. And so, can you talk about what you would be willing to offer in terms of
Yes.
Tax write-offs, in terms of tax incentives for the entertainment industry?
Sure. And let's take a step back, if you don't mind, Brian, before I address that specifically,
Sure.
and to say this. Look, California invented the entertainment industry. California is where all of this started. We have actually imagined the future of entertainment. We have built this industry. We are the entertainment industry, and we need to continue to be. And I understand what a high percentage of these jobs have been lost over the last few years. That's the first point. Second point, tax credits to the entertainment industry are not a cost. They're an investment. And that investment returns more money to the state of California than we
Yeah.
give to it. So when you think about it, you think like, oh, we're going to spend this much on, education. That's money where it does pay back, but you can't really see it. In the entertainment industry, you can see it. This is an investment in our state. So from my standpoint, we cannot afford to lose this industry. We have to be aggressive about tax credits. I know that tax credits last year, I think it brought in $29 billion worth of production. From my standpoint, I think we have to be more than competitive about tax credits. I think we have to look at the regulations about shooting in
Yes.
Los Angeles and in SoCal, well, all over the state. I don't want to be focused just on Los Angeles, although that's really the primary place. But I want to make sure the regulations are not hampering or crippling, particularly small productions. This is a critical industry for us in terms of jobs. It's a critical industry of something that really represents a whole region. People tend to think of movie stars, but these are good middle class jobs and a lot of them are organized. And I want to say one last thing, which is infuriating. As we look at that merger, the CEO is making $800 million as a kiss to get him to agree to it. This is an industry that is incredibly valuable to everybody. We should not be allowing this incredible industry to leave California. This is something we should fight for tooth and nail, and I can tell you I will as governor. This is not something that we're going to let go. This is an incredible foundation that we can't get back if it goes. So let's make sure we don't let it go. Let's put the money into it. Let's make sure we're not over-regulating, and let's make sure that we absolutely incent a lot of production, a lot of small production, really get, the industry back on its feet in a big way.
I'm glad you said that. I'm also glad that you mentioned the fact that it's not just like these movie stars, right? This is not like on behalf of Brad Pitt and George Clooney. This is, there are gaffers and PAs, and there's craft services, there's local restaurants, hotels, I mean, transportation, the entire industry. There are major downstream effects in terms of who this impacts. The entire, just like
We
any, just
need
like,
to fight for this.
yeah.
We need to fight for this as a state. This is a priority. Absolutely. And my big point is we don't have to be cheap because it's not a cost, it's an
Right.
investment that more than pays itself back.
Is there a world where you would be open to an uncapped tax credit? Recognizing that the return on investment is always going to be higher, that more money that goes into these tax credits only bring more money into the state.
I think we'll have to have some. Let me say this. I could be uncapped, Brian, if we had an ability to overlook and make sure that we were doing smart things as we went along. I don't want to have a free for all. I think that's unrealistic. I think it's got to be something. If the state is putting in money, the state needs to have an opinion that continues to be a good thing to do. But putting a specific amount of money into it, I'm not sure it makes sense, to be honest.
Okay. Is there a number that you have in your head in terms of what you would like to see as a tax
I
credit in
don't, and I'll
California?
tell you why. Because we've never really come down to look at it together.
Yeah.
And this really goes, Brian, to the way that I think about being an executive, being a governor. And that's this. Good decisions are made when you get into the details. God is in the details. And so in this case, I absolutely have an opinion. I absolutely have an attitude. And then we need to sit there and look through the numbers to make sure we understand how it's going to work and what happens as it gets bigger. Does it become less effective?
Right.
And also in terms of, their competing priorities. But what I'm saying is this is an absolute priority for the state of California.
Great.
But we are going to look, I've run a lot of organizations. We need to run things well. And that means being in the details and putting people in charge who are absolute pros, absolute experts. And that is what I'm going to do.
Last question here. What does success look like at the end of Tom Steyer's first term?
Success looks like Californians can afford to live in California again. Success looks like we continue to grow and achieve and create the future, but it brings everybody along. I mean, let's take another step back. We're the richest state in the richest country in the world, and we have the highest poverty rate. We are not a leading education state. What I'm saying is I want to continue to thrive on an overall basis, but I want the way that the prosperity is doled out to be much more even-handed. I was, my town hall tour is called Shared Prosperity Tour. I want us to make sure that the working people of this state share in the prosperity that is being created in this state real time. I want to keep creating prosperity, but we absolutely need the working people of this state to share in it. And what you asked about the film industry is a perfect example. We need to make sure that the working people of this state share, and at the end of the month, they can afford to own a house. They can have great education for their kids. They can pay for food and electricity and their gas prices. And we get back to the California dream. We live in the most beautiful state in the world. Let's get back to a place where we're building it together, and we take great pride in building it together and bringing everybody along.
For folks who are looking to help your campaign, where can they go?
TomSteyer.com.
Great. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description. For those who are listening on the podcast, I'm going to put it in the show notes. Tom, as always, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Brian, thank you very much for having me.